Welcome, Vintage Hollywood Archive. Joan Leslie of Warner Brothers had every right in the world to walk up to Hal Wallace, the head of Revels out in Burbank, and tell him what was going on in show business. For 14 of her 16 years, she had cajoled the public out of its monotony and misery with entertainment ranging from out-and-out calm to something that reviewers will almost certainly refer to as art after her next film, Sergeant York, hit the theaters. However, she never used that option. Joan Leslie was 16 years old, but she was no fool. She was, among other things, quite exposed to life at 16. How did Joan Leslie was scammed and lose everything? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you're new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Vintage Hollywood Archive channel. Joan, Mary, and Betty Brodel. Joan's wanderings gave her a certain amount of wisdom not synonymous with her young age. Don't get the impression that Miss Leslie was a sophisticated smoothie, or as the writers like to put it, a woman of experience. Her demeanor, on the other hand, was innocent but pleasant. She dashed into places, almost always breathless. Her face would light up with glee, and her eyes twinkle with delight. She spoke as though she was the West Wind's relative as she jumps from one subject to the next. Gabby was what a cabbie would name her, but in a wonderful way. The eyes were hazel with a leaping motion. The hair is auburn and lengthy. She was tall and slim. You'll have to figure out the jargon for yourself. Soft and scenic is how a reporter described it. Her shoulders were large and taper at the same time. Her face had a modern classical look about it. She had a habit of singing "Give Me Some Skin" by the Andrews Sisters in one breath, and in the next, she was just as likely to play a sun goddess. For the first Southern California All-Winter Sun Festival in 1941, she created a fantastic sun deity. The show's producers were so thankful that they gave her a stylish car with 25 dials and instruments on the dashboard, as well as bales of oranges, crates of figs, and truckloads of grapefruit. The ex-goddess, you see, was obsessed with vitamins and fruit juices in general. Even though Scotch and soda had never made it through a 16 Warners, Joan Leslie had every right to be under a lady's beautiful palate. Lemonade was her limit, though she did once gulp alcohol at the behest of someone. She felt it was disgusting. If you thought the chick was cool for not drinking booze, wait until you hear how she romances the 1-2 skidoo. Jane Withers had her Joe E. Brown Jr. and Master Freddie Bartholomew on occasion, but Joan Leslie had no dates at all at 16. Joan Leslie's scorching nocturnes amounted to little until the Daisies arrived, 1941 vintage. She had a girl acquaintance whose brother went to Loyola, it seemed. Well, it appeared that this well-behaved young guy didn't have a girl to accompany him to the winter dance, so his sister pulled some strings and convinced Joan to attend. Milo, of the Warner Wardrobe, got her unique outfit for the event. When she wore it for them just before she took it home, his coworkers all agreed, it's just Joan's age. If you enjoy the details, the gown was almost like a costume dress. It was made of quilted taffeta in a delicate blue robin's egg color. The cuffs of the sleeves were puffed. The skirt was full so that when she whirled, the hem left the floor like a plane taking off. She categorically made sure she did not spend 2 hours getting ready. No makeup, her mother inquired as she was about to walk out the door. Not even for this large bash, says the mother. I don't want to have the appearance of a movie star, was her simple reply. She combed down her hair once more and left. Director Howard Hawks had this to say about his unusual heroine in the Sergeant York saga. She's amazing for a youngster of her age. Of course, she will have to learn certain things, but I've never met someone who is more eager to learn. Or you're less reliant on others. She knows what she wants, and I doubt she'll be stopped anytime soon. Hawks was as right as aces when it came to predicting the future, especially if past performance is anything to go by. She made her debut when she was 2 years old in the city of Detroit. It was an auditorium where a children's show was being presented. Betty, 5, and Mary, 7, 2 of Joan's sisters, were scheduled to perform a couple of numbers. The clog dancing was the theme of their line. The event was almost over when the master of ceremonies screamed for a specific teeny Miss Gray to come out and sing, "You've got me picking petals off the daisies," as he informed the audience. Imagine his amazement when Joan walked onto the stage, said that the other girl was sick, and started singing, "Let a smile be your umbrella." The audience erupted in applause. The MC let out a chuckle. Joan received a few dollars in exchange for her troubles, as well as the impresario's eternal gratitude. That performance confirmed two things. First, a two-sister act would be transformed into three, and second, the act's fee would rise. That night, the girls' father received the news with a mixture of skepticism and excitement, questioning a 2-year-old's delight at the idea of a twosome becoming a trio. To begin with, he wasn't named Leslie. It was Brodel, to say nothing of Irish. Brodel had worked for the People's Wayne County Bank for 20 years as a teller until he was let go. When Mary and Betty, who had been clog dancing since they were 3, asked their mother why they couldn't go professional and do a little performance for the money, the family wasn't exactly starving. Some clubs hired tiny girls who looked like them. They had witnessed them firsthand. Mama Brodel pondered it over and took them to one of the agencies that hired talent for the kiddie circuit. Lions, Elks, Masons, and so on. More to please them than out of any expectation that anything would come of it. When Joan came out to sing Let Us Smile, etc. to the youngsters, they were all doing fine. Joan's act was in good shape by the time she was 5 years old. The agents demanded and received $15 for the act, with some receiving as much as $20. Tap dance took the place of clog dancing. Furthermore, the girls became instrumentalists. Mary played the saxophone. Betty strummed the banjo. Joan used an accordion to create melodies. After 4 years, the Lions, Elks, and the rest of the Lodge Boys had almost lost access to the females. Their charge was shocking. $35 was their asking price, though they would occasionally accept $30 from the Elks for the sake of tradition. They had become very professional by this point. They had new routines every 18 months or so, and their costumes were replaced every 2 years, or as often as one girl outgrew hers and burst out of it like a butterfly from a cocoon. Both of these were costly, particularly an encounter with a colorful gentleman who, according to the 3 Brodels, was a dance prodigy. When they approached him and asked if he would teach them some classy dance routines, he was a well-respected Detroit teacher. They described him as very modern. He said he could teach them. By the way, so many came at a rather high cost. The girls' expenses were so expensive that they ran out of money before they could master the new exercises. At this point, Mary had a brilliant idea. Why not leave the musical instruments with the dark dervish as security? When they explained the situation to him and promised that if he continued to educate them, they would pay him as soon as they had the money, he said it would be fine. When they returned for another class 3 days later, the titan of the tap was not around. They had been waiting all afternoon when they got word just before dinner that he had left town with the following Brodel loot: king saxophone, just about paid for too, $125. Paramount banjo, $85. Italian accordion, $110. Joan was the one who felt the pain the most. To begin with, Mary disliked toothing the saxophone, while Betty thought the banjo was syrupy. Joan, on the other hand, was a fan of the Italian accordion. They nursed their wounds in silence and went about their business as if nothing had happened. By the time Joan was 12, Betty was 15, and Mary was 17. They had performed in 2/3 of Detroit's theaters. They then began traveling to homes in nearby cities such as Flint, Toledo, and Lansing. Understandably, the biggest event in their lives was when they chose to go international. It was a rather basic task. After crossing a bridge, you arrive in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Mama Brodel was serving as the troops manager at the time. Mama Brodel was a wise woman, but even she got strong-armed regularly. But their kids, chiselers would say during talks, with labor relations, were taking risks here. They conducted a whole tour of Canada. Betty and Mary launched the act with 2-point harmony. They'd next perform a sizzling, ultra-modern dance number, the same one given to them by the instructor who had hot-footed it to unknown locations. Sister Joan would emerge after they had left, singing Rhythm in My Nursery Rhymes. They were designed by Mary and executed by Mama. They were knife-pleated white chiffon gowns with white leotards and a rhinestone-studded belt. Joan will tell you today, we liked white. The hue flattered us because we were 2 redheads and a brunette. The brunette is Betty. It was a beautiful life, albeit a little stressful. They traveled from one location to another in a new Ford. Papa Brodel was the driver. Mick, who was a wire-haired terrier, was the troupe's mascot. They'd stop in a city for an engagement, and Mama Brodel would scramble to locate a tutor for her children, as the law demanded. This is except for Mary. They stayed in Montreal for 8 weeks at $200 per week, and by the time they left, Joan was speaking French as fluently as Annabelle. Don't make the mistake of assuming the Brodels were well off. Long layoffs depleted the reserve fund. They were always able to get work just as the money was running out. When the family supervisor thought they were ready to try New York, they had just concluded 2 weeks of the big time in Detroit, at an all-time high of $250 per week. In New York, the Brodels experienced 2 things. The first was, as you might expect, a screen test. Joan got it after an MGM scout spotted her in the Paradise restaurant and got her name on the contract with Columbia in a photo finish. The second incident occurred when they ran into an old friend while strolling down Broadway. He was the dark-skinned gentleman who had stolen their instruments. Is it true that they called the cops? Hardly. They greeted him warmly and expressed genuine delight in seeing him. They admired him a lot. The steps they showed them were dubbed slick, fantastic, and everything in between. They didn't mention the instruments, and he didn't say anything about them. They even asked if he could educate them again. He said he'd be happy to, and he did teach them. Only, he wouldn't take a nickel. After all the hubbub in New York when they discovered her, MGM essentially disregarded Joan Leslie, designating her as a child player. They let her do a microscopic part with Greta Garbo and Robin Taylor in Camille. There followed brief cameos for several corporations in Men with Wigs, Two Thoroughbreds, Winter Carnival, High School, and Laddie. In the Warner film, Nancy drew Reporter. She made a few moves on gelatin. When a hawk-eyed Warner executive saw the film, he immediately spotted her potential as a seductive young ingenue and dismissed the kid stuff. He drew up a contract right away. Joan Leslie signed it as quickly as she could. She was given a couple of spins in High Sierra. She was also given a larger role in The Wagons Roll at Night as a result of her performance. She is cast opposite Eddie Albert in The Great Mr. Nobody thanks to Albert, who appreciated her work in the circus film. She didn't disappoint him. She was ready for Sergeant York after contributing to 30 Days Hath September. The Brodels were essentially the same 3 girls who used to distribute maize all over the world. Even if they tried, they couldn't have made it in Hollywood. However, with Joan under contract, the family moved to California and rented a small apartment, and Mary and Betty were frantically looking for a connection. When a Warner scout caught up with Mary, she was singing in front of a band. He offered her a film contract test, completely unaware that she was Joan's younger sister. She took the test and passed with flying colors, landing a contract with Warner as Mary Brodel. Mary was the most attractive of the 3. She resembled Danielle Deroux when her hair was piled up. She looked like Madge Evans with her hair parted on the side. When she wore her hair up in bangs that hung low on her forehead and put on a bewitching expression, she looked like Lily Damita. When she was herself, she looked like June Lang. She was once swarmed by autograph hounds at a preview who didn't believe her when she stated her name was Brodel. She signed 19 autographs in June Lang's name that day. Betty, on the other hand, was yet to be discovered by Hollywood as of 1941. Unknown, but not without talent, Betty performed nightly at Lindy's, a Hollywood restaurant. Joan and Mary used to frequent the place to eat now and then. They had a knack for appearing out of nowhere and tended to bring the house down with applause. When Betty arrives at their table when her songs are finished, the 3 Brodels have a great time conversing with each other. The Brodels' loyalty is something to write about in the Maxim books. When Joan is interviewed, she will tell you that Mary is the family's most gifted member. When you talk to Mary, she goes on a rhapsody about Joan and the undiscovered Betty. If you spent an hour talking with Betty, you'll end up with 55 minutes of ramblings that can be summed up in 3 words. Joan is fantastic. Such was how much admiration the sisters had for each other. What happened with Joan Leslie and the girls was quite stressful. These girls in the Hollywood industry had to learn very quickly what life was all about. And Frances had her own lessons. She had to realize that life is all work very soon. Watch this video and get to know the details.